The dusty main street of Redemption Gulch shimmered under the unforgiving Arizona sun of 1889. The air, thick with the smell of dry earth and distant mesquite, offered no relief. Daniel Boone, his weathered face shadowed by the brim of his wide-brimmed hat, sat at a rickety table outside the Last Chance saloon. A half-eaten plate of beans and salt pork sat before him, his coffee, black and strong, steaming in a tin cup. At 47, the years spent taming the unforgiving frontier had etched themselves onto his rugged features, a map of countless sunrises and perilous nights. He watched the town awaken, the creak of wagon wheels and the distant shouts of a blacksmith marking the day's start. He was a man of few words, his thoughts often dwelling on the memories of his wife, Sarah, lost to a fever nearly 3 years prior. The solitude had become a familiar companion, a quiet ache that resonated in the vast emptiness of the desert. The territory's endless horizons had always beckoned him, a canvas for his restless spirit. But since Sarah's passing, even the open range felt a little lonelier. He ran a hand over his neatly trimmed beard, a gesture of quiet contemplation. His next prospecting trip wasn't for another 2 days, leaving him with an unusual stretch of idle time. The saloon's interior offered only the ghosts of past revelry, and his small cabin on the outskirts of town held little more than a cot and his prospecting gear. He found a peculiar comfort in observing the sparse life that unfolded before him on the dusty thoroughfare. Whispers of a new silver strike in the Superstition Mountains had reached his ears, but he felt no immediate urgency. He had seen too many booms turn to busts, too many dreams evaporate under the harsh desert sun. A young woman, her blonde hair partially obscured by a tattered bonnet, approached the saloon's outdoor seating area. She moved with a gentle sway, a precious bundle clutched tightly to her chest, wrapped in what looked like a faded calico shawl. Her dress, though clean, was worn thin, hinting at a life of hardship. Daniel watched as she paused near the saloon entrance, her eyes, the color of a desert sky at dawn, scanning the few patrons with a blend of quiet desperation and lingering pride. There was a resilience in her posture, a stubborn refusal to break, even under evident strain. Their eyes met for a fleeting moment, and he saw not just need, but an unexpected fire, a spirit that refused to be extinguished. She approached his table, her steps light despite her burden. "Pardon me, mister," she said, her voice surprisingly soft but clear, carrying a faint accent he couldn't quite place. "I noticed you haven't finished your meal. Would you be willing to part with the rest?" The question hung in the still morning air. Daniel had encountered many requests on the frontier, pleas for help, demands for charity, but never one quite like this. There was no artifice in her voice, no attempt at manipulation, just an honest plea born of dire necessity. He observed her more closely. She seemed no older than 20, perhaps 21. Her eyes held the deep weariness of sleepless nights, a testament to the tiny life she cradled. The baby in her arms stirred slightly, a soft coo escaping its lips, a sound familiar to any man who had known the tenderness of fatherhood. "Course," Daniel rumbled, pushing his chair back with a scrape. "Please, ma'am, sit a spell." The woman hesitated, her gaze flickering to the baby. "I don't mean to impose on your peace." "Ain't no imposition," Daniel replied, his voice softening. "Was just about done anyways. Make yourself comfortable." "Ain't no imposition," Daniel replied, his voice softening. "Was just about done anyways. Make yourself comfortable." She settled carefully into the chair opposite him, adjusting the baby with practiced grace. The infant appeared to be just a few months old, its tiny fist occasionally emerging from the shawl to grasp at nothing. "Name's Daniel," he offered, nodding towards the saloon's swing doors, silently motioning for the barkeep. "Alara," she replied, her gaze meeting his, a faint blush rising on her cheeks. "And this here is little Willow." The barkeep, a burly man named Jeb, lumbered out. Daniel ordered a fresh plate of beans and pork, along with a warm biscuit and a glass of milk. "The grub here ain't fancy," he explained to Alara, his voice gruff but kind, "but it's hearty. No sense in settling for leavings." Alara's eyes glistened, though she quickly averted her gaze. "You don't have to do that, mister." "Didn't mean to." "I know what you meant," Daniel said softly, understanding the unspoken sentiment. "But I'd be honored to buy you a proper meal if you'd allow it." As they waited for the food, Alara slowly at first began to share fragments of her story. She had arrived in Redemption Gulch only a month ago, seeking refuge from a mining camp that had turned dangerous after her husband's sudden death. She had hoped to find work, but opportunities were scarce for a lone woman with an infant. Been staying at Widow May's boarding house, she explained, gently rocking Willow, but my funds are running low. There's talk of a seamstress position opening at the general store next week, but it's not certain. Daniel listened intently, his gaze unwavering. He recognized the raw courage in her voice, the strength it took to lay bare her struggles to a stranger. He thought of his own daughter Mary, now grown and married, living with her family in the distant town of Tucson. What if Mary had ever faced such destitution? When Alara's meal arrived, she ate slowly, deliberately, savoring each mouthful while keeping one hand free to soothe Willow. Daniel found himself reflecting on the countless solitary meals he'd consumed, the necessity of sustenance often overshadowing the simple pleasure of sharing a meal. "How old is little Willow?" he asked, breaking the comfortable silence. "She'll be 5 months next full moon," Alara replied, a soft smile gracing her lips as she looked down at her daughter. "She's been a true blessing through all this. Sometimes I reckon she knows we're facing this together." Daniel nodded, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Baby's got a way of knowing more than we give him credit for. My Mary was the same. Seemed like she could sense when Sarah and I needed her to be patient as we learned the ropes of parenthood." "You have a daughter, eh, Mary?" "She's got 2 young ones of her own now, a boy and a girl near 7 and 9. Daniel reached into his buckskin pouch, pulling out a tarnished tin locket. He opened it, revealing a faded tintype of a young woman with a kind smile and 2 small children. Time moves like a swift river. One moment you're fretting over their first tooth, the next you're watching them ride off into the world. They talked as the morning wore on, the sun climbing higher, casting longer shadows across the dusty street. Alara spoke of her dreams of opening her own small shop, of providing Willow with a life of stability and comfort. Daniel, in turn, found himself sharing stories of Sarah, of their early days prospecting, of the quiet strength that had defined their life together. "Sarah always believed in a second chance," Daniel mused, his gaze drifting to the distant mountains, "said that a person's circumstances ain't their final word." As the saloon slowly began to fill with the midday crowd, Daniel made a decision that felt both natural and necessary. He pulled a worn leather pouch from his belt, extracting a handful of silver dollars. "Alara," he said, pushing the coins across the table towards her. "This here's not charity. Consider it in advance. I'm heading out on a prospecting trip in a couple of days. Need someone to look after my cabin, tend to my small vegetable patch. It ain't much, but it'll give you a roof over your head, and a bit of coin." Alara stared at the silver, then back at Daniel, her eyes wide with disbelief. "But, why, mister? You don't even know me." Daniel was quiet for a moment, watching as Willow's eyes, bright and curious, fixed on his weathered face. 30 years ago, Alara, Sarah and I were just starting out. Young, green, full of dreams, but empty pockets. Mary was just a babe, a stranger, a grizzled old trapper named Jedediah. He gave me my first break, not just with a few coins, but with a chance to prove myself, to earn my keep with dignity. He paused, a flicker of memory in his eyes. Jedediah, he saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself at the time. Taught me that true success ain't just about what you gather, but about what you help cultivate in others. Tears welled in Alara's eyes, tracing clean paths through the dust on her cheeks. "I don't know what to say. Say you'll consider it. Say you'll make that cabin a home for you and little Willow." "I will," Alara whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you, Daniel, truly." As they prepared to part ways, Daniel watched Alara gather her things, her movements tender and protective, as she adjusted Willow in her arms. There was a quiet strength in her devotion, a testament to the enduring power of a mother's love, even in the face of daunting adversity. "Alara," he said, as she rose to leave, "that seamstress position at the general store, what time is your interview?" "Tomorrow, after the noon hour." Daniel smiled faintly. "Old man Peabody, the store owner, he owes me a favor or 2. I'll have a word with him tonight. Not to guarantee anything," he added quickly, "but to make sure he sees what I saw today. A woman of grit and spirit." 6 months later, a small neatly penned letter arrived at Daniel's cabin, delivered by the Redemption Gulch stagecoach. Alara had gotten the seamstress job, and with the steady income and a roof over her head, she had begun saving. She was taking lessons from Widow May in bookkeeping, hoping to eventually open her own small dry goods store. Enclosed was a new tin type of willow, now sitting upright, a toothy grin beaming at the camera. "Dear Daniel," the letter read, "I often think of that day outside the saloon. You showed me that asking for a hand up isn't a mark of shame, and that accepting kindness isn't a sign of weakness. But most of all, you showed me that there are still good souls in this vast world, folks who see others not as strangers, but as part of a larger family. I pray that someday I can pass on the same grace you extended to me, not just the practical help, but the reminder that we're all connected, that every life holds value." Daniel carefully folded the letter and placed it in his worn Bible, next to Sarah's favorite passage. He thought about that dusty morning outside the Last Chance saloon. How a simple request for leftovers had rekindled something essential within him, the profound satisfaction of human connection, and the quiet privilege of offering a helping hand. That night, he wrote a letter to Mary in Tucson. "Been thinking about your mother's words," he penned, his hand steady in the lamplight, "about everyone deserving a second chance. What about them, Pa?" he imagined her asking. "I reckon she'd add something to that, Mary. I reckon she'd say that sometimes, giving someone else a second chance, well, it gives you one too." As Daniel gazed out his cabin window at the vast, star-strewn Arizona night, he reflected on how the most profound moments often arrived unannounced. A young mother's quiet courage in seeking help, an old prospector's recognition of a younger self in another's struggle, a simple frontier miracle of human kindness, bridging the chasm of circumstance. Sometimes, he realized, what appears to be a solitary act of charity is in truth a mutual exchange of grace, offered and received by both souls, reminding them both that they are more alike than different, and that no one is ever truly alone, so long as they remain open to the quiet possibility of connection. The desert wind outside still carried the scent of mesquite and the promise of another blazing sunrise, but now it also carried the memory of a conversation that had subtly altered two lives, one gentle act of kindness at a time.